Even little Miss Lori didn't want to stick around in the courtroom to see the aftermath of her and Chad's little charade. And we're going to talk about that and some of the heartbreaking details in today's video. Hello Sofa Squad, and welcome back to the sofa. That's the sofa behind me with our trusty sidekick, Mr. Roscoe P. Coltrane, holding it down back there, and my name's Paul. Now, like I said earlier in the introduction, we are going to be talking about the Lori Daybell trial today, and specifically some of the going-ons in the courtroom, and even more specifically, her not wanting to stay in the courtroom for the latter part of the day when Detective Hermosillo was on the stand, going through some of the absolutely heartbreaking evidence of the excavation of Tylee and JJ and that. So let that be a complete, just smack this video with a trigger warning. If that is too much for you, again, just skip this video. I get it. When I was reading through the tweets and stuff like that and articles, I mean, I was gonna do a live chat actually that night, and I was like, you know what, I can't even. It was so surreal, and it just really brought the whole thing home. It's just, again, I have goosebumps. It's one of those things. So again, if it's going to be upsetting, don't skip this video. And the way we will do this video is we're going to, again, refer to some of Justin Lum's tweets that he did in the courtroom and use those as talking points. We'll first start off, though, by looking at a headline to just kind of give us some context of what we're talking about specifically in this video. Now, you can also hear the audio. Usually it's out that evening after that if you want to hear the whole thing. Not in this video, though. You can check that out on East Idaho News. They post it. I know Scott Reich has it. I think a couple of other channels are posting it as well. So if you do want to hear that, the actual testimony audio-wise, it is out there. Now, with that being said, let's go ahead and dive in. Now, like I said, I'm putting this article up here. This is in People Magazine. It's by Christine Pilecek. I hope I'm saying her name right. Published April 11th, 2023. And it reads, Detective recounts grisly excavation of Lori Daybell's slaying kids, says husband sped away from scene. And this is specifically what we're going to be talking about in this video. I just kind of wanted to give a little, starting point for where we would be at. So let's go ahead and dig a little deeper. Now, again, on the screen, we're just going to go through this little overview to put us all on the same page. So on Tuesday, Rexburg, Idaho, the police detective Ray Hermosillo, that's who I mentioned earlier, he testified at Lori's trial and revealed the chilling details about the day he found the remains of her two children, Joshua J.J. Vallow and Tylee Ryan. Now, this is just a quick overview. If you have not followed this case, this is going to give you a insight into where we're at, what we're talking about specifically with this day. So the police came to the property owned by Lori's husband, Chad Daybell, on June 9th, 2020. That is the day in question. A bunch of stuff happened before that, which we'll hit on just a little bit, but this is the day of the excavation. And as it says, they excavated part of the property's pet cemetery. I know, it's horrible on all ends, Hermosillo said. A few of us got on our hands and knees and began digging around this moist section of dirt, he said, adding that investigators began to smell a decomposing body. We eventually uncovered bits and pieces of Tylee, who we assumed it was Tylee, that had been burned. There were pieces of bone, charred flesh, just gobs of flesh that were falling apart. Now, Tylee was last seen alive at the age of 16. So that gives you an outline of what was going on that day. It was horrifying. It was heartbreaking. And this is when everyone started to say, oh my God, it all became even that more real. Mostly to the public, because again, if you follow this from the beginning, you'll know bits and pieces were coming out where the kids, that type of thing, we kind of figured something bad was going on. This was the shocker, the jaw dropper. So that being said, let's go ahead and now start looking at those tweets and talking about that. Now, these first tweets that we're going to look at are describing when the search warrants were taken out to look into the townhome apartments. These were for Lori, Alex, and Melanie Boudreau. Now, this is when the cops have gone out there. They're like trying to talk to Lori, but they run into Chad. They're just kind of meeting all these people who will become major players in this. And things aren't right, right? They're like, what's up? And so that's what these tweets are in reference to. So let's go ahead and start at the bottom here. So the next day on 11/27/19, RPD obtained search warrants for 3 townhome apartments: Lori Vallow, Alex Cox, and Melanie Boudreau. So they're all going to converge out here. They're going to come out here. You know, they've gone the day before. Something's not right. You know, let's get some search warrants. Let's come back. First, RPD went into 175. There were couches, dishes in the sink, food in the pantry, and it appeared like people lived there, but Hermosillo says there were no clothes in the closets, just empty hangers and no people in any of the apartments. The next tweet reads, Wood, anything of interest that you find in apartment 175? Hermosillo responds, there were several guns in the garage and several army-type knives, several empty magazines for different weapons. The next tweet continues, next, RPD searched 174, Melanie's apartment. No, JJ, no other individuals were inside, and 107 was completely empty. The following tweet says, in Lori's apartment, police found a rental agreement for a storage unit. Time to get another search warrant. Now, you can only imagine when the cops go there the day before trying to do this welfare check and they can't put their finger on anybody and things seem sketchy, so they go back and now this, right? It's like, this looks like someone just packed up and left. But then when we're finding out all of these guns and weaponry are there, I mean, this is giving cult, right? I mean, this is just like, which is what it was. And so I can only imagine that this part was like, okay, this is really, really bad. Now, when they get this whole thing for the storage unit, you know, the storage unit to go for that, again, I'm like, oh my God, I can only imagine the sinking feeling that they had to have had. Like, you know, when you're like finding something out and your adrenaline's going, whether it be something like this, or I don't know, you know, you're getting ready to get bad news or even sometimes good news and your adrenaline's like, something's getting ready to happen. I can only fathom, but obviously this is super bad, right? So I can only imagine the feeling that they were going through, let alone people like the family of Kay, Larry, people like this who were, you know, the ones who prompted the investigator, who were screaming, hello, this isn't right, where's JJ, where's Tyler, what's going on, we can't get a hold of her, the whole 9 yards, right? So I can only fathom what that gut feeling was like more and more as they were doing this and finding this out in bits and pieces of what they've all up and left. And oh, I mean, just super bad. Okay, let's continue. Now, these tweets are just going to be in reference to some of this ammunition and whatnot that was found, which again, I was just like, I mean, my God, why do these cults that want to save the world and all this religious, biblical stuff, they have to be armed to the hilt? So let's read through them. So they're looking at exhibits here and whatnot. So 8B, trash bags had a lot of clothes that investigations took out to take photos. 8C, several rounds of ammunition in a tub or container. 8D, rifle that was discovered in the garage. The end barrel of the rifle is threaded for a silence or a suppressor per Hermosillo. 8E, black rifle and another rifle laid out on a table after being recovered and taken to RPD. 8F, silencers and suppressors taken for evidence. And 8I, a handgun was also found in the garage. Again, why does it always have to be this way? Why do we have to be armed to the hilt to save, you know, the planet or something like this, or whatever they're trying to do, the 144, whatever it is for the specific cult, you know, think of David Koresh, all these people, right? Okay, but then when the cops are going through this, and it's like, okay, this is like made for the silencer and stuff like this. Now, also remember, if you have followed this case, I sit here and speak a lot of times like I'm talking to someone who has followed the case verbatim, and a lot of times these videos, I'm going off on a little sidebar here, a lot of times these videos are done in that context, so I apologize if that is the case where you're like, I don't know all these little details to this. I apologize, I'm sorry, but I just get on a rant here and get going, and I just feel like we're sitting on the sofa and we've been following this together through the long haul, so I apologize, but if I speak like that, sometimes I need to catch myself doing that. Okay, so the whole thing of Brandon Boudreau being shot at with the Jeep and Alex and the whole 9 yards, right? So then, again, now, this is all in the moment, this information coming out and they're finding these guns and all this. In hindsight, we can see it all as one collective picture, right? But in the moment where it's all coming together, I mean, it takes a bit to piece this all together. But regardless, when you are going through and finding this with search warrants and you're finding things like, you know, weapons that have been modified in this way and stuff like that. I mean, this is bad, especially when children are unaccounted for and missing at the center of the whole thing. Now, I thought this was just a sombering tweet that Justin put out. The press release on the kids came out 12/2019. It was a Friday. I remember one of our producers gave us a brief summary on what we knew, saying this would be a national story the weekend we aired our first report. I mean, in that part right there, I mean, I can remember this going on in the makings of it coming out. And I remember, if you follow me from the beginning, Denise Rainey, God rest her soul, she's no longer with us, but she was saying this is one of those cases, y'all, this is going to be next level, like insane, right? And I mean, she would just, I mean, my gosh, she would love to see Lori finally coming to justice and Chad and whatnot. But she was calling it out then, and it was so fresh, and it was just so out there, the things she was describing. You know, I never would have imagined in a million years that we would, number one, finally be where we're at, but the information and the tragedy that would come out of it. So now we're going to move on and discuss the day of the excavation and how that went down. And so let's just read through this and we'll talk about it. So Hermosillo now talks about that tragic day, June 9th, 2020. And Hermosillo says that RPD showed up to Chad's property. Daybell's son had a bowl of cereal and said his dad was asleep. Police said they needed to talk to Chad and walked up to his room. They told him they had a search warrant. Hermosillo, Chad asked if he could contact his lawyer, who was at Mark Means at the time, or at Means Law at the time. Now again, this was huge because when this went down, I mean, Chad knew his number was up, right? Now, he was also, they'll talk about how he was on the phone and staring across the, you know, the property and watching where they're digging, all this type of stuff. Well, we know at this point that he was on the phone with Lori at one point, right? And so the whole thing was just so surreal. And it also, to me, speaks to what a coward he is, because he will try and run at one point. And that also speaks to the fact that he knew what he did was wrong, right? He knew that was wrong. The bodies were on his property. If you don't think that this is wrong and whatnot, then why run from law enforcement when they're digging them up? You know, go figure. Okay, let's continue. So Hermosillo, Chad sat down near the front door and looked at the search warrant. He asked if he or his kids needed to leave, and police said they did not have to leave. His kids decided to go, and Chad went outside and got into his car to make a phone call. Woods asked what happened next. The FBI arrived and the investigators marked different areas in the backyard. Hermosillo and Chad Daybell. He was in his driveway sitting in the car while on the phone, intently looking over his right shoulder behind him. Wood, what did you observe when he looked in that direction? I observed the tree and the pond area. I mean, my God, looking over his shoulder at the area where those little children, I was going to say babies, but I mean, you know, JJ and Tylee were trying to play it off like this was for the good of humanity, for the good of whatever, and absolutely knowing that what he did was wrong. He is about to go down. Him and Lori's little game is about up. It absolutely runs all over me. Now, y'all, this is going to start getting into some of the graphic details here. So if you have been watching and you're like, this is where it's going to get a little, you know, so just be forewarned. So let's go. So we see a Google Earth image of the Daybell property. Wood is confirming pieces of the property that RH has described, for example, driveway, house, pond, and tree, he confirms. And Hermosillo says, initially we found an area of concern due to longer grass and weeds. It caught our attention. The excavation would begin this area. Hermosillo watched ERT team remove top layer of soil. Then it began to expose 3 large white rocks. Hermosillo noticed a strong odor of a decomposing body based on his training. Under the rocks, 2 pieces of wood paneling that would be removed. Hermosillo saw a difference in soil, and it looked moist. I mean, can you imagine? They knew, right? They knew when they started doing this ain't gonna be good. But now also remember this whole pet cemetery thing, which, I mean, again, only Chad and Lori. I mean, it's just everything about this case. Now, if you're not familiar, you know, Chad used to be a cemetery sexton, and he wrote a book on it, One Foot in the Grave. I know. I did a reading on it. I'll try and find the playlist and link it. It's a cringy self-published book, and you get an actual look into his completely narcissistic personality. But I can only fathom when he was doing this that he had the attitude of like, you know, I've done this before, I know what I'm doing, people, which is even more disgusting. So Hermosillo says, after removing the soil, we saw a black round object protruding through dirt. It wasn't very deep and it appeared to be texture of a plastic bag. As Hermosillo described the digging of the burial site, he saw what looked like a body wrapped in plastic. Jurors are taking notes, and one of the jurors has his chin in his hands, intently listening. Hermosillo says Steve Daniels slit through the plastic and they saw brown human hair. At that point, he says police were told Daybell was leaving his daughter's house, speeding. His daughter lived across the street. Police called up to Daybell and he was arrested. Eventually, RH returned to the burial site. The body was photographed and removed. Authorities put the body in a black evidence bag. JJ's grandfather, Larry, is looking down, listening. A victim's advocate has her arm around him. Lori is watching Hermosillo. Now that's the part that just gets me. Imagine, number one, being the officers, you're doing this, and you see this is a body, a little body. Now, of course, at this time, they're not sure probably immediately who it is, you know, but they just know the answer to their question of where their children, they're starting to find it. And then Chad, who's been parked across the street, looking on the phone with Lori, you know, watching them do this, knowing that his number is up, is going to try and speed off. And again, that's why I'm just like, oh, they 100% knew what they were doing, especially Chad. You know, I mean, the bodies are on his property, and to speed off like that, I just, again, I sit here and try to imagine how one could know, well, number one, do that, obviously. Number two, run off to Hawaii and know that you've done that, know that that's buried in your backyard, and then have the pictures smiling and laughing and dancing. How could you even have a moment of peace after that? Now this gets even more graphic here, y'all, so just be forewarned. Hermosillo points to an area known as the Pet Cemetery to the Daybell. He shows us where a black dog statue is located. Investigators were on their hands and knees digging. Hermosillo says they found burnt flesh and charred bones. They took turns digging because the smell was so bad, rotating every couple of minutes. When he says he returned, ERT was already excavating this part of the yard. Then Hermosillo walked to the pet cemetery area. The team noticed items of interest and realized they had to dig methodically around this moist section of dirt. Eventually, RH says they recovered bits and pieces of who they assume was Tylee Ryan. They found pieces of bone and charred flesh. Globs of flesh were falling apart. Hermosillo says this glob appeared to be in a melted green bucket. The flesh and bone was stuffed into the bucket. The team kept digging around it. They switched with each other and got down to the bottom of the mass to ultimately lift it onto the tarp. When I tell you that that sinks my heart into my stomach, I can't imagine being in the courtroom. I can't imagine living through this like people have. Larry, Cam, thinking all these people. What kind of a monster could do this to another human being, let alone a kid? Also so interesting, look at the differences in what was done to each child. I think that's so interesting. And tragic too. It was like Tylee was just destroyed, you know, and then the hands, the whole 9 yards, and then just put in the backyard like that, like one of the pets, you know. I mean, my God, I can't, you know. And then to sit here and think, like, I mean, because in my mind, I'm imagining Chad and Alex out there treating it like, you know, Alex was, or what's his name, like Chad was back at his, you know, cemetery days, you know, with one of his workers, like, you know, just nothing, you know, just all in a day's work. I mean, it just, I can't. Now, some of these tweets here will describe what some of the pictures look like that they were showing, and again, God bless the jurors, God bless the reporters, God bless everyone in there. And the things that I was seeing come out, or people were talking like these are unseeable things. Like, I mean, my God, I mean, these are life-changing images, I'm sure. So 10I shows the paneling now removed. We can see the moist soil and there's black plastic barely peeking through. 10J, you definitely see a bit more of the round plastic. Hermosillo says it looks like the crown of a head sticking through the dirt. 10K, Hermosillo says after seeing the crown of a head. The team cut through the black plastic and saw white plastic they cut through as well. He points to the pieces of hair around the area. 10L, the dirt is fully removed off the plastic. Hermosillo shows us the shape of a body in a plastic bag. He says JJ was removed from there. Larry bends over and is becoming emotional. He wipes his eye. God bless him for being in there. I mean, God bless him. I mean, this is devastating. This is absolutely devastating to think that these monsters could do this to someone you love, to a child who had their life ahead of them. I mean, it's absolutely devastating. Okay, now we're going to be reading some tweets about the drama. Here, so again, we're reading this through the lens of, well, what happened? I mean, if you're watching this, you probably already know, but I just want to talk about it, obviously. This was my thing that I was talking about. Lori always has to, in my opinion, I do not know her, and I'm not a psychologist, I'm not a therapist, I'm not a lawyer, I'm not a cop, not any of that fancy stuff, so these are just my opinions. But Lori always has to somehow revert the attention always back on herself, right? It's always about her. I mean, look at where we're at, right? So this whole thing that she is pulling about, I don't want to be in the courtroom. I don't want to be in the courtroom. And I'll give more of my thoughts on it, but that's what we're getting ready to enter into, so just know that. Back in the courtroom, Lori Vallow is now seated as we wait for Judge Boyce. Now, Vallow's attorneys ask the judge if they can all speak in the hallway, including Vallow. She came in with a black cardigan on top of her shirt she had on. She crossed her arms and appeared serious, sad. So right now, Judge Boyce, prosecution is what he meant to say, defense and Lori Vallow are in a hallway speaking. We noticed from the gallery that she looked upset. Breaking. Lori Vallow requests to waive presence and not be here for the rest of the day. Archibald. It was an emotional day. He cites mental health issues of Vallow. Now State responds. Idaho Rule 43 says defendant needs to be present for trial. Blake says State of Idaho has the right for defendant to be present. And then ruling, Lori Vallow's request to waive presence at trial is denied. Jury will now be brought back in for additional evidence. Lori is sitting back in her chair looking at Jim Archibald. She is clearly not happy. She's seated closer to Thomas right now, who is on her right. Okay, so here's my thing with that. First of all, overall, I feel like this. I'm like, no, you don't get to just leave when the going gets tough. When the imagery of, consequences to actions is shown, you don't get to dip out, right? You need to, no, you signed up for this, so you can sit there and live through it, just like everybody else that you forced to live through this. Not by their choice, obviously. I mean, she made these decisions that led to this, right? So it really disgusts me that she is going to be like, oh, I'm having mental health issues. It's a really emotional day. I'm like, really? How do you think Larry and Kay feel? You know what I'm saying? I mean, that's just what I'm like, how do we even arrive at this? It doesn't even make any sense. Now, it was also interesting when they said that, she was seated close to the other attorney and, upset and all this. I mean, I think that's what she does. Even in the midst of all this, she still makes it about herself. And that's where I'm just like, this, I mean, granted, I get it, she's one on trial, right? So yeah, it is about her in some degree. Yeah, but when you start looking at the victims in the case, it's like, honey, this isn't about you. We're not really that concerned. We're concerned with justice and making sure that justice comes to the surface, obviously. But I'm not really concerned if she's having an emotional day because she's seen pictures of what she was allegedly part of, causing to have happen. That part really doesn't sit well with me, and I'm glad to see that the judge ruled that she had to stay in there. Honestly, kind of surprised he did at this point, to be honest. Okay, let's continue with just a couple more. So Hermosillo explains the cutting of the plastic bag that JJ was in. This led to the autopsy, and would ask, what did you observe when they cut the bag? I saw a little boy in red pajamas. He had a white plastic bag on his head with several layers of duct tape on him. RH describes how JJ was wrapped from head to toe. The white plastic bag was cut and taken off JJ's head. His mouth was duct taped from jawline to jawline. I mean, again, it's just the things that they did to these children. I'm like, how could they even sit there and do that? And I guess I sit here and also think, you know, with Alex, you know, someone who I guess his allegiance was to Lori, though, because I'm just like this is your family, right? But I guess none of these people looked at it that way. I mean, that's just what makes me sit here and think. You know, you see these pictures of them and they're doing this and that, you know, and then it's like, but this is the outcome. This is, you know, hours later, days later, you know what I'm saying? That just shocks me. Larry Woodcock has his hand in his head, leaning over and crying. Hermosillo confirms he recognized who appeared to be J.J. Vallow based on the photos he had seen. And I felt like that was a sombering note to end on, because at the end of the day, this is just an absolutely heartbreaking case. It's a heartbreaking chain of events. It's heartbreaking information to learn, and it's angering. It's senseless, and there's absolutely no reason for it, and it continues to be senseless. I hope we don't continue to see these shenanigans out of Lori when the going gets tough. I am very afraid that she'll continue to pull this whole dramatics of, you know, oh my gosh, the going gets tough, you know, I'm having a mental day, or, you know, I need a little refresher, or that kind of a thing. But to hear this information, I shouldn't even say hear, because I didn't, honestly, this is something I didn't even want to listen to the audio of. I didn't, y'all know me if you follow me. I'm like, I want to, you know, the textures of the courtroom, this and that. This was stuff I was like, I don't want to hear that. Like, it's that bothersome to me, right? Doing the text messages, or the what do you call these things, tweets, I was like, I'm good with that, you know what I'm saying? That was enough for me, because even this was disturbing to me. My heart goes out to the family and loved ones there in that courtroom, as well as to the jurors and the people there, the reporters, everyone there, seeing these images, hearing this. I don't know how you would get past that. This is so disturbing. I don't know how you would get past that. And then to hear that Lori is laughing and joking with, you know, the attorneys and whatnot, and, you know, at times appears just to be, you know, like we expect out of Lori, you know, just like, it's a joke, or, you know, whatever, or, you know, well, I'm mad now because I can't get my way and leave the courtroom because this is getting a little bit dicey for me, you know, and I'm having to see the kids like this, and, you know, I don't like that, you know. No, absolutely not, girl. So that's it. If you're still watching, please drop hearts for the victims, as well as the victims' loved ones and families who've survived this and are living through it, and helping to bring justice to the victims and these monsters underneath the jail, hopefully. And that's it. I do appreciate you watching, and until the next time we gather around the old sofa back there, I'll see you soon.